Hi, Vivian.
Good afternoon, Philip. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Busy. Everything's great.
Good. Yeah, I've been busy as well. So yeah, all good. So we're just waiting for some of the audience to log on, and then we can probably get started in a minute or two. So for anybody that's logged on who doesn't have the episode on a DVD and they want to watch along, if you go to YouTube and type in "Lives in the Pictures," so LIVES, and then in the pictures, you'll find my YouTube channel. One of the videos is the Saint, the Spanish Cow. Unfortunately, due to copyright issues, it won't work. You won't be able to view it outside the United States. So so it is there for those that.
Have you resent it to me?
So I'm just going to send you the link again, Vivian. Okay, you should have it now.
Yes, I do. I haven't.
Okay, perfect. So if you want to pause it on the opening shot of which says the south of France, we're all. So if everybody wants to get the episode ready, pause in the opening frame, which comes up with a caption, the south of France. I'll give people a minute or so to do that.
Okay, I've got it.
Play.
Yeah.
Okay, so I pause mine. So just let people do that. If anybody has any issues, then just let me know. I think we're probably good to go. Okay, so if you're ready, Vivian, I'll do a countdown from 5 and we'll press play.
Okay.
Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. Okay.
Should I take the sound off?
Oh yes, please. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So some very glamorous stock footage we're watching now, because of course, unlike the Persuaders, that the Saint very rarely went on location, so you had been based at glamorous Elstree Studios for most of it. And I take the garage scene that is happening here. That would be probably the back lot at Elstree, I'm guessing.
Yeah, at Pinewood Studios.
At Pinewood, yeah.
Yeah. You know, working with Roger was such an incredible pleasure, because he truly was the gentleman of show business. Apart from being so incredibly good looking, he was so charming. He had the most wicked sense of humor, and he appreciated everybody down to the tea boy on the set, you know. It was truly, I mean, I was very honored because I did 3 films with Roger. And even when he got the Bond series, he tested me to do one of the Bond films with him. And my test was, you want to speak about the film, or should I just?
Well, we'll come back to Bond in a bit, but of course you've just made your first appearance in the episode. And opposite of the lovely lady playing the title character, the Spanish Cow, actress called Nancy Nevenson. Do you remember Nancy at all?
No, I'm really sorry. I vaguely remember her. I didn't connect with her very well.
I mean, it's a terrific role, isn't it? She has. She brings a large than life personality.
Yeah. She was the wife of a dictator, you know, from a country, and was running away with all the crown jewels.
Yeah.
That we'll see along the episode here.
I'm sure it's one of those stories that, although fictional, you get the sense that could easily have happened at some point in history, and it's very believable.
Yeah, I mean, I hated the title because a lot of my friends at the time thought that I was the Spanish Cow in this episode, you know, but it wasn't me. I was the good girl.
Yeah, I must admit, initially when I was, first saw the title, I of course, like everybody, was quite intrigued as to what the Spanish cow were referred to. So, but of course, you find out that it's actually something that translates into more of her character rather than that.
Yeah,
It's not a literal meaning. So it means a woman that's well, not necessarily a woman, but somebody that's absurd and clumsy and does ridiculous things. So I think that's a pretty good summary of some of her flaws, although she has lots of good points as well.
yeah. Well, she's
Um,
running away with all the jewelry of her country, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
yeah, she's got. We'll see in a minute. She's got them tucked under her coat.
Sewn into her coat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah, but
you,
Roger was just a delight. I mean, I just treasured every moment I was with him, you know.
hmm.
Michael or Mike.
And I think we'll see in a bit later on a gentleman called Gary Raymond, who's the other co-star. Gary is still around, but I did approach his agent, but he doesn't do any public appearances anymore, sadly. But we'll get on to Gary as we go on a bit. But do you remember, first of all, how you got cast in the Saint to begin with?
Well, this isn't my first Saint. I did another one previously to this one, and I must have been 17 years old.
Hmm.
And I didn't know Roger at the time. I actually auditioned for the part, and I got the part. But I really had a connection with Roger throughout the years, you know. We became very good friends, and he was just somebody that I absolutely adored to spend time with. I became very good friends with his wife, Luisa. She was Italian, and because I spoke Italian, we always spoke in Italian. And of course, with the three children. And I used to go and have dinners or luncheons at their home. And they lived near Pinewood Studios. And also, we used to spend every Christmas skiing in Stad because they had a chalet in Stad, and I used to go every Christmas with my kids there. So we used to ski together as well. And Roger was the classiest skier you ever saw on the mountain. I mean, his outfit, his way of skiing, he never ventured too far because of insurance purposes. He wasn't really supposed to be skiing, you know, because if he broke a leg or God forbid anything like that, he would be impeded to make any movies, you know, and he had a lot of contracts.
Oh yeah, yeah. And here we do see some nice action from Roger, and I mean, it looks like most of this is him rather than a stunt double. Would you have? Do you think that Roger liked doing his own stunts? Was he quite good?
He liked doing his own stunts, you know, but obviously they rehearsed it very well before this was filmed. Okay. And obviously, I mean, there where it looks like he's kicking it, he doesn't really kick him, you know, but it's very, very well rehearsed. I mean, I love it after that big fight, not a hair out of place. Isn't it wonderful?
Oh yeah, yeah. Part magic of the movies, isn't it?
Yeah, but look at that wonderful face and those blue eyes. But it was more his charm, his personality, his warmth, you know. And also, oh, there she is with all the jewelry inside the jacket. It was also the fact that he knew I was starting off in my career, and he gave me a helping hand, a sureness, you know, because it's very intimidating to be in the set at Pinewood Studios shooting a movie, whatever movie you're doing. And Roger always gave me a lot of, you know, strength to carry on.
Yeah, it's a sign of a great actor and human being, isn't it? To nurture, because there's a lot of people in Hollywood that either are very self-obsessed or, you know, might have ulterior motives and things like that. So Roger was a very good friend to have in your corner, it sounds like.
And it was at that time when I was working with him over the next 3-4 years that I got my offer from 20th Century Fox to go to Hollywood on a 7-year contract. And I was very confused, you know, because I mean, it sounded so The American Dream had landed on my lap. And I remember having lunch at Pinewood Studio with him and showing him the offer and asking him for his advice. Do you think I should go to Hollywood? And he went, my dear girl, if you're going to make it, that's where you've got to make it. And I'll always be at the other end of the phone.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
So what did you think? Do you have any memories of what you thought of the Saint script at the time? What did you think about going into the Saint? Because it was quite an established show at this point.
It was a very famous show. And I have to tell you, because I was so young, I mean, I must have been 17 years old when we shot The Spanish Cow. And I was not learned enough or experienced enough to actually pass judgment whether the script was good or the story was great, or give that deep judgment that you can do only when you've had a lot of experience, you know?
Yeah. I suppose at that age, it's more about going with it, and it's a roller coaster, isn't it? At any age, but particularly that young, and just trying to do your best. Really, I would have thought.
Yeah. No. Listen, I was just very, very flattered that they picked me as for a second Saint, and then obviously for the Persuaders, you know, which is a series with Tony Curtis. And then he tested me to do one of the Bond movies, but the test was a scene of him in bed with me. And unfortunately, it really didn't quite, I was too young. I looked too young next to him in the bed. Yeah. And he didn't say anything to me. He took me to the screening. He put on the test. And then when the lights went up, he asked me, what do you think, Viv? I want to hear your opinion. Well, Roger, I feel that I really look a little bit too young to be doing what I was doing on that test. And he says, I'd be put in jail if you were my leading lady, he said.
Yeah. I imagine because you look very, well, you still do look very youthful, but you look in the episode, so, Roger always looked young as well, but you say the age difference, I think, and that's one of the curses of perhaps looking younger than you are sometimes, is that it can sort of misbalance you a little bit. So,
yeah. And the other thing is that Roger was always beautifully dressed.
Yeah.
Beautifully dressed. Not so show-offy, but just beautifully coordinated, you know?
Yeah, I think he always had great style. And when he went on to the Persuaders, he does have a credit when it comes to his wardrobe. So I imagine even back at the Saint days, he was having quite a lot of input in his dress. The gentleman we're seeing with Roger at the moment is Arnold Diamond, a very prolific actor. He's been in some original Avengers episodes. He was also coincidentally in an episode of Persuaders as well, as a policeman. So obviously he was kind of sort of a good fit for those type of roles. Over the years, Viviane, have you watched different versions of The Saint with different actors? Ian Ogilvy, Val Kilmer movie. Are you aware of the different versions of The Saint?
Do I watch The Saint? Do I watch? When they happen to come on whatever I'm watching or not, because they're still repeating them. I mean, it's amazing. It amazes me. I know that it was one of the first most popular TV series in the UK, The Saint.
Yeah, we really put Roger Moore on the map after doing things like Maverick and Ivanhoe. But yes, The Saint was what transported him
into becoming a popular actor, I think, rather than a Hollywood movie star, you know. I mean, he was always a movie star, but what I mean to say is he became much more identifiable, much more accessible in the television series.
I think there was one story when he started to do the Persuaders with Tony Curtis. They were shooting outside in the south of France, exterior locations, and there's lots of fans screaming and and Tony thought, oh, it's my fans, I'll just go and say hello. Actually, they were there for Roger Moore,
Roger.
the Saints. So I think that's the point where Tony, oh yes, he is very famous as well. So
well, I remember coming on the set of The Persuaders, and I'm sitting in my chair waiting for me to be called in front of the camera, and Tony Curtis walks up to me and introduces himself. He says, so this is the Bella Viviane Ventura. I've heard so much about you. I'm Tony Curtis. And he started chatting with me. And at that moment, Roger arrived, looking dapper and wonderful. And when he walked over towards me, Tony stopped talking to me and left. And he said to me, on this set, on this film, Viviane, it's either Tony or me. Where does your lie? Where does your lealtad lie? You know?
Yeah.
I said, why do you can't ask me that question? You are my friend. You're the person I love. He says, well, I just want you to know that I do not speak to Tony Curtis. And they did that series, really not liking each other the entire time. But it must be also for something like what you've just said, that Tony rushed over to the fans, and in fact they were, no, we want Roger.
And we're seeing Gary Raymond on screen at the moment. Coincidentally, he also guest starred in a Persuaders and did the New Avengers as well. Do you remember much about Gary Raymond?
Yes, very debonair, a little bit frightening, and he looked at the role. He's a baddie, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, in the Persuaders, he played sort of the guest villain, if you like. So yes, I suppose he had more than his fair share of villainous roles.
What was his name? Gary?
Gary Raymond.
He didn't play my husband in The Persuaders, did he? Or the film?
No, he was in a different episode to you. He was one that was filmed, I think, a bit later on. I think there's an awful lot of crossover, I think, as we touched on before, between the Persuaders and the Saint, because people like Robert S. Baker, Johnny Goodman, the production manager of this one, went on to work on the Persuaders. There's an awful lot of crew that and cast that seems to sort of cross over both series.
So do we have public? Do we have comments?
We do have some public watching. No questions so far, but I'm sure they will come through as we go. So in terms of filming the Saint, again, I imagine sort of like a week, 10 days sort of shoot. Was it? I imagine this was a much quicker shoot than, say, the Persuaders, because it was more.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, you were given 3 pages of script, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot when you're filming it. And you had to go through those 3 pages a day. So sometimes some of the scenes were rushed. And, we had to be there very early in the morning to be ready on the set at 8:30, made up with your lines, dressed and everything. There was no time to dilly-dally at all. There was a schedule to be met, and it was met, And I think, if I remember correctly, each episode was at a 2-week schedule, 5 days each week, 10 days. And each episode was filmed for over 10 days.
Yeah.
But, they hired very professional actors. So that meant that everybody knew their lines. There was no kind of mistake when you were, doing your role, or retakes. There was never that problem, I remember we just really swam through the scenes.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that all the actors supporting and also the major players are very established actors. So you have that professionalism, that talent, which must have made it a lot easier. I was just thinking, do you remember the episode's director? It was, I've got his...
Philip, don't do that to me. I'm afraid I don't.
That's okay. The episode was written was directed by John Gilling, and And again, he'd done a lot of.
I remember him, John Gillen. Yes.
Again, he was a very sort of seasoned director. Did a lot. He did 10 Saints in the end, Department S as well, Champions. So did a lot of TV work. I imagine it's probably, when it comes to any sort of filming, it's more the bad directors, or those that perhaps weren't supportive, that you might remember more than the nice ones. So
yeah. Here's the baddie, the suave baddie.
Yeah.
Handsome though, huh?
How would you find working in black and white? Did you sort of find that as nice as a medium?
Well, I mean, that's what I was used to. That's exactly what I was used to. And then Technicolor came in. The Persuaders was in color. But both the Saints that I did was in black and white.
And did you find any difference in terms of the way you would be lit, where the set decoration was?
Completely. In color, when color was in, it would take a much longer time to light a scene than it did in black and white. Much longer. That's a good question, Philip. That's a really good question. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I mean, was there any benefits? Well, obviously, black and white was as you say, a quicker way of shooting, perhaps more efficient. And I think also that the lighting, I think, and the fact it is in black and white, does give it a style and a mood that perhaps if it was in color, it wouldn't have.
The other thing I wanted to say was that Roger took the time, when we had this long scene together, dancing and talking to each other, to rehearse the scene with me, not on stage, but, during the lunch hour or something. I mean, he would that's what I mean when I say he was very caring. He didn't have to rehearse his scene because he knew exactly what he was going to do. But I was always a little nervous. And he said, come on, Viv, we're going to rehearse the lines, okay? And then he would help me and guide me on what kind of emotion I should put into my dialogue and how I should look. And sometimes he even comment on my dressing, the dresses I would wear and things like that. Yeah, he was my mentor. I have to tell you, my mentor. And right up until before he died, he was my friend.
That's a lovely lifelong relationship.
Yeah. About 2 years before he died, I invited Roger to come to Vienna, to come to raise money for old people's homes in Austria, okay? And we had a very busy schedule. He arrived in Austria, and he's the only star that said to me, Viv, I see the schedule that we're doing, but I don't see myself visiting an old people's home. And I want to go and visit an old people's home before we start the press things and everything. And he insisted that before he started doing whatever we had to do, he would be taken to an old people's home that was financed by this charity. And I have to tell you, it was so unbelievable when these old people saw Roger at the door, and he'd come in and he'd sit down with them and talk to them. And all this was filmed for the news. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. He was very, very generous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his work for UNICEF is, of course, very well known. And he was always... I met him, but I saw him, I think, 3 times as an audience member at various sort of talks and events he was doing. But I did get to meet him very briefly, and he is one of those people that is lovely to everybody. He's really engaging.
That's what I'm saying, yes. I mean, I remember sitting on the set with him and the tea boy. We always had a tea boy around. And he would ask for a cup of tea. And, he'd stand up to receive the cup of tea and say, thank you, my lad. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I need. I mean, really make everybody feel important, that whatever job they're doing, they're necessary.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the key, isn't it, to any good actor, producer, whoever it might be. So in terms of, would you have watched the episode when it was broadcast? Did you like to watch your work when it went out?
Well, of course I wanted to watch it. I mean, I was quite proud of what I did. I tried my best to look the best and do my best. And I always got an approval wink of Roger when we finished a scene together, You've done well, Viviane. Sometimes it gets a little difficult to watch yourself on the screen. I mean, I did this movie for MGM called Battle Beneath the Earth, which was so ridiculous. And I cringe when I see this movie. I mean, I'm leading the whole American army underneath the Pacific because the Chinese are invading America, making tunnels from China. And I'm the archaeologist with the whole American army. I'm leading it to stop the Chinese coming. I mean, so miscast, I can't tell you. And then they dubbed me with a Chinese accent. So, yeah.
I think we're all going to be looking up that film later on. I think it sounds that it's probably one of those cult films that has a good following because it's perhaps a bit ridiculous. People tend to like that sort of thing, I think.
Well, we go down in a volcano in Hawaii and we're going to cut the Chinese tunnels off from invading America. But I mean, the thing is, I was supposed to be an archaeologist and I knew everything about the tunnels, but I was 18 years old. I mean, you couldn't possibly believe that I was qualified to lead the US Army like this, Follow me, boys.
So how did you end up with the role? Was it part of your contract or?
No, my agent would call and say there's an MGM movie, and they give you a brief description of what it is. I film test for the part, and I auditioned for it, and lo and behold, I got the part.
I mean, it must be difficult to know what's going to work and what isn't when you're handed a script.
At that time of my life, yes, because I didn't have enough experience to be able to say, no, I can't possibly do this. This is ridiculous. I don't fit in, But that's how it is, I mean, when I got my first film part in High Wind in Jamaica with Anthony Quinn, I was working in a repertory company in Colchester, earning £25 a week. And I was assistant stage manager, and I was the double to the lead in the plays. Every repertory does a play every week. I was responsible to borrowing the props for all the scenes, and we did a play called Worm's Eye View. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's very well known. And the whole second act is under the rain. And the whole second act, the actors refer, do you hear the rain? Is it still raining? And I had this enormous box full of nails and dried peas that I had to turn around behind the scene to make it sound like the rain. And then when they mentioned the rain, I had to do it quicker, And then I did the test for this movie for 20th Century Fox, and I got the part. And this was the beginning of everything. Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, sort of a whirlwind situation, really. Did you enjoy your time in repertory? Did you enjoy the live theatre, the audience? Did it make you nervous?
I found it extremely rewarding because I was up at 7 a.m. and I went to bed at 11 o'clock at night, nonstop. And as I said, I was ASM, assistant stage manager, which meant that I was jack of all trades, master of none. I was in charge of the costumes. I was in charge of getting the props. And the problem in Colchester is that when I arrived to become the ASM and I'd have to go to a store and borrow a lamp, and I would say, I'm coming from the repertory company. Oh dear, we're not giving you anything. The last one didn't return the goods. And in fact, that's what they didn't do. The goods were just thrown at the back of the theater and nobody ever returned the things. And I had such a hard time getting a lamp for this scene or a television for this scene. And I kept saying, I'm different. I will return it, Then.
So you say you were doing a lot of, I guess, understudying the...
And I understudied the lead in the plays, which meant that I had to learn the role in case he got sick.
Yeah.
So, and I'd lived in digs. Digs is like a room at the top of a house on the 6th floor with no elevator, okay? And a bathroom which you kind of was down the stairs somewhere. And that's where you lived, you know, because with the money you were earning, you couldn't afford anything else. But it was an extraordinary time for me.
And did you find it quite natural to learn lines? Did you have any techniques, any process you went through?
Well, I started drama school at Ada Foster's, which was a children's drama school, while I was still going to my French lycée. So I had a very, very busy schedule. And I had a photographic memory, which meant that I could really remember things very, very easily. I still do, which is quite amazing. I mean, I can recite poetry and from Persian poets, from Roman poets and things like that, that I learned during that period. So I did what I had to do. I mean, I was, the understudy. I was the special effects. I was the costume lady. I was the tea lady, and I was the props lady. You know.
And did you find that you, as young as, did you do much of acting? Did you find you had to go on the stage that often? Was it more learning it and never came
No,
up?
I never went on stage. It was almost a year at Colchester. Never went on stage. I was 16 years old. Never, but I learned all the plays, of course. You know.
What did you? Would you have ever? Obviously, I know that you retired from acting very young, but if you had gone on, could you saw yourself on stage doing a mixture of film and TV? Would you have liked to have done it all?
Philip, I would have loved to have gone to RADA. That was my next step from Colchester. I was auditioning at RADA, and I really, really was serious about learning my trade, because I think acting is a trade. You know, we tend to lose ourselves with all the glamour and all the this and all the that, but it is a trade. I mean, all the wonderful actors we have, they all went through what I went through. They all went to drama school. They all worked in repertory companies, you know. Jeremy Irons is the classic example, and he's a brilliant actor, but he has worked at his trade from the moment he decided to become an actor. And he can tell you, you know, he was earning nothing in a play and learning a play every 2 weeks. This just doesn't happen by miracle. Of course, you know, when you start making the films in Hollywood, the level, I'm not saying the level goes down, but it's on a different level. It's your appearance that counts, the color of your eyes that counts, the length of your hair, how tall you are. And the values of the acting career change completely. They really do change.
I mean, I think you said before that you almost have developed, you have to develop a crocodile skin almost, because you could very easily be hurt and take things personally. But of course it isn't. It's what the casting, what the role has. And if somebody's that short or by that too much, then, or say eye color. So it must be initially quite difficult.
The rejection you have to understand that it's not personal. It's what they see. And you have to learn to cope with rejection, because you didn't always get the parts you would go for, or even the parts that, you know, there was a wonderful film called Exodus. I don't know if you remember, with Paul Newman.
Yeah.
It was a classic. And I was told by Zanuck that I was going to get the lead in that film, that Fox had lobbied and I had the film. And it was a very important film. And I tested for it. I tested 3 times for it. I was already in Hollywood at the time. And I was convinced I had the film. And I loved the story. It was, you know, it was a story about the Jewish people arriving in Israel, you know, in this ship. Well, at the end of the day, they contracted a completely unknown Sue Lyons. I'll always remember her name. And she was blonde with long hair, completely the opposite that I was. And I'm going to tell you something. I was I wanted to die. I was so depressed about that. I couldn't explain to me why, but that's it. That's show business.
Yeah, as you say, it's just one of those things, isn't it? But it's knowing that at the time, and because a lot of people would struggle with, you know, with something like that. But yeah, it's I think it's a very glamorous industry, but of course it's also
very glamorous industry, but you pay a price. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I can tell you. I was earning $500 a month or $1,000. I can't remember on the contract, which just about covered my rent, my food, my car. You know, it didn't give me any spare money. But if I didn't do what the studio wanted me to do, I would be put on suspension. So I would have to get a job. Otherwise, I wasn't able to eat. And at one point, I had a terrible fight with a very big producer, Carlo Ponti. Okay. I'm not going to go into the details of the fight, but I poured a huge drink over his head and left the table. And Richard Zanner called me up screaming at me to say that I can't treat the big producers like this, that I wasn't going to work in town if I didn't lend myself to be charming. And I said, Richard, I'm not going to sit there with this man who's married to one of the biggest stars in the world and is putting his hands all over my legs. I'm not going to do that. So I'm in suspension and I get a job and I'm selling encyclopedias to the Mexican ghetto, which I don't even want to tell you. They couldn't read. They didn't speak English. And I kept knocking on these doors and they opened the door and they had cardboard boxes for sofas. And I'm supposed to convince these poor people to sign up to pay $5,000 eventually, because that's what it comes to after 5 years, to buy this thick encyclopedia that they couldn't understand what it was about anyway, you know? So yeah, that was a really bad period.
Did you ever manage to sell any or?
No, I just sat on this because they dropped you off at 6:30 in the morning on the Mexican side of Los Angeles. And then they would come and pick you up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I just sat on the sidewalk and I speak fluent Spanish. So it wasn't that I couldn't communicate with them. But I opened, one of the ladies who opened her door to me had 6 children running around the house, half naked, really dirty, and screaming and crying. And I'm supposed to come and sell an encyclopedia in English to this lady? No, it's impossible.
Yeah, it would have helped if they were at least in Spanish encyclopedias or something that.
It wasn't in Spanish, it was in English.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? They could have a very, you know, that would have helped, wouldn't it? But yeah, I had a question come in from Gonzalo. You based upon your friendship with Roger Moore, did he ever mention Audrey Hepburn to you, or did you ever meet Audrey Hepburn?
No, I never had the pleasure and the honor of meeting her. Really meeting her. I had dinner one night in Rome with Rossano Brazzi and his wife, and she joined the dinner, but she wasn't sitting next to me. Rossano Brazzi was sitting next to me, and we were about 10 people in a restaurant called Piccolo Mondo. And she came in with the then husband, I think his name was Dottore Dotti. She was married to an Italian. And she was sitting at the other end of the table. And I have to say, I was mesmerized. Absolutely beautiful and so elegant and so, you know, everything I wanted to be, you know.
Yeah, she's one of those very glamorous, almost untouchable. But
but not unfriendly, you know, just very charming, very nice. And said to Rossano, "You're sitting next to a beautiful girl, Rossano, and your wife is sitting next to me. You better behave."
I want to. Did you get much feedback from your appearance in the Saint? Do you recall it being
Yeah, I had a lot of fan mails. I had a lot of fan mail that was sent to me, especially in Pinewood Studios, you know. I did quite a lot of films in Pinewood Studio because I did High Wind in Jamaica. When we finished filming in Jamaica, we moved to Pinewood Studios. I did All the Saints and the Persuaders, and I did the film with Cliff Richards, Finders Keepers. So I was almost a resident there.
Yeah.
And then when I was asked to be the official mascot to the football team in England by Sir Bobby Moore, football team came to the studio to make the announcement to the press that I was the official mascot. And Sean Connery, Yul Brynner, Richard Johnson, Steve McQueen were all there having lunch. And when they heard that the football team that had made, that was going to play in the World Cup, and by the way, they won the World Cup that year, the only time England ever won the World Cup. They all came out to the garden where the press was. And of course, I was ignored because the press was so fascinated to see all these huge stars there, you know?
Yeah. So that must have been quite something. I mean, do you have any fleeting memories of Steve McQueen, Sean Connery? Were they very nice to you?
Well, I have to say, I have an anecdote with Steve McQueen. I always had lunch. Sidney Poitier was filming To Sir with Love at the time. And we used to have lunch very often together. I never had lunch. I always had cheese and biscuits. That was my lunch because, you know, you always want to keep thin. And on one of these lunch occasions, this guy walks up to my table and he goes, "Miss Ventura, my name is Dan. I'm Mr. McQueen's personal assistant." I went, "Yes. Mr. McQueen wants to know if you'd like to have dinner with him." And I looked at Sydney, and Sydney went like this. And I said, "Listen, would you tell Mr. McQueen that if he wants to have dinner with him, he's going to have to walk up to the table here and ask me himself."
Yes.
So Sydney shook his head in approval, right? So the next day, Steve McQueen walked up to my table to say, "I hear I've got to come and invite you in person." I said, "Well, don't you ever do that? I mean, I don't understand sending your assistant. It's kind of offensive." So he says, "Well, Vivian, can I invite you for dinner? Would you mind having dinner with me one night?" So I looked at Sydney, who was like this on the table, and he shook his head and he went like that with the thumb. Okay. Now I could accept to have dinner with him.
And I mean, was that a nice? Was that a nice experience to? I mean, a legendary figure. Was he?
I'm not sure if I should tell you what happened because that's in my book, 1001 Nights. But it is kind of a bit of a. Should I tell you the story? What happened?
I'd love to hear it if you're happy to.
So we made the date to have dinner 2 or 3 days later. And at that time, Steve was living in a house in Little Venice, which is one of these big houses. And, you know, in England, normally in these big houses, you have the ground floor, there's a bar, the kitchen, and the dining room. And then on the first floor is the sitting room. And then on the second and third are the bedrooms. So when I arrived at the house, he sent me his driver. The assistant opened the door and he says, "Miss Ventura, Mr. McQueen is waiting for you upstairs." And I assumed it was the sitting room. So I go upstairs and they open these big double doors. And Steve McQueen it's his bedroom. It's not the sitting room, right? And he's sitting in this big, big bed, looking absolutely to die for, in white jeans, a white t-shirt. And he's watching TV and he's like with his arms behind his neck. And I walk in and he goes, "There's that beautiful Viviane Ventura. Come and sit here." You know, he goes at the end of his bed. I'm not scared of sitting at the end of his bed. And I go, "You know, Steve, you haven't told me where we're going for dinner. I just hope I'm appropriately dressed." And he says, "Well, Viv, you know, I've got a problem. I need to make love before I have dinner. So why don't you just join me?" Well, he said something else, but I'm not going to repeat it. And I looked at him and I said, "I guess we're going to go hungry then." And I got up and left and asked Dan to get the car for me. I didn't make it. I didn't scream. I didn't react at all. I just said to him, "I guess we're going to go hungry," and left the room. I cried all the way home in the car. I was so shocked, so shocked. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose he was so used to women falling over him that he was very sort of probably a bit.
I mean, it's just that I found the aggressivity of the way he did it so offensive.
Yeah.
I'm not a prude, and I've been around many times, and I've had an incredible life. Not what I'm trying to put forward, because that would be an untrue image of me. But there is limitations as to what I can accept or not accept, and I found that extremely offensive to speak to me like that,
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the nice thing about, say, last decade or so, you have the Me Too movement, and people are more willing to share, very negative stories, and there's lots more. I think that Hollywood and the industry is changing for the better in that respect. There's not.
I think people have gotten smarter and tougher, and the rules have changed a bit.
Yeah.
A lot, actually. The rules have changed a lot, And at the time that I was in Hollywood, which was the late 60s and 70s, I didn't know what I was getting myself in for. I thought I had a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox, and I was going to be a star. The reality was something completely different. Completely different. Yeah. I worked a lot. I seemed to get part after in all these great miniseries like The Wild Wild West, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the Don Smart Show, The Loner with Lloyd Bridges. Every show I went up for, I got the part. I was working. But everything that was on the side of this was just quite shocking.
Yeah. And so that's one side of it. And then of course it's 6 days a week, it's long hours, it's a tough business to
very. And at the time, Joan Collins was living in LA with Tony Newley. She was married to Tony Newley. And I must say that Joan extended her friendship and her arms to me. And she felt that she knew how I was suffering. And I'm very grateful about those years that she was there, because that's when we cemented our friendship, which we have to today,
and obviously Joan Collins also did a Persuaders, strangely enough, as well. So you have like a little sort of club sort of
she's
thing.
The best. She's just amazing. Absolutely, she's an icon. I mean, absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, she's one of those people that I've always been a great admirer of, from Road to Hong Kong, the Persuaders, and all sorts of other things, and never seen her in person, unfortunately. But so as we're sort of getting towards the end of the episode, I think what's quite interesting is that your character is quite a complex one, in the respect that for a lot of it seems that you're the innocent, sort of caught up in the middle of it, and of course then there's this lovely reveal at the end that you are wanting to get the jewels for yourself. So it's a lovely twist in the character. It must have been quite fun to play somebody that's pretending, and then there's that reveal.
Be that person. Yeah. I must say, I'm looking at Roger here in this scene, and again, I mean, he just looks so wonderful, so elegant, so dapper. Best looking man ever,
Oh yeah.
And I think he was one of the best Bonds as well, because James Bond is suave and seductive and irresistible,
Yeah, I think he's my favorite Bond actor. And
is he?
Yeah, and I know that Sean Connery cast a very big shadow, of course.
Yes. Sean put the footprint of the Bond movies, and it was very hard to get to that. But then of all the others that followed, for me, Roger was the best for me and my taste. Yeah, it was.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't go and see a Bond movie, but when Roger was in them, I did go.
Yeah, I think there was a lightness of touch, and it was in the first couple they made the mistake of making him a bit tough like Connery, but actually once they got going, they let
They
Roger play
allow his personality to come through, you know.
Yeah. We did have a question. Gonzalo asks, what memories do you have of Sean Connery? Did you have any memories of Sean Connery?
Yes, I knew Sean quite well, actually. I was very friendly with his wife, Micheline, who is a French lady from Morocco. This was at the time that Sean used to live in Marbella. He had a house in Marbella. And although I never worked with Sean, I would have loved to have worked with him. Socially, I had an opportunity of meeting him, and on several occasions we had dinner. And just, in fact, I took Kevin Costner to Atlantis to meet Saul Kersner a few years ago. And Kevin wanted to play golf. And I'm a golfer. So I said to Kevin, I'll organize, there's a beautiful golf course at the Ocean Club in Atlantis, in the Bahamas. But then I remembered that Sean lived in the Bahamas, in Life at Key. So I called him up and invited him to join us. And he came and spent the day with us. And it was very, very nice. He actually does not like to play golf with women. I think he's a little bit chauvinistic, I think, a little misogynist. But then Kevin said, Sean, Viviane plays very well. She's not going to hold us up. And I actually do play really well, really good golf, you know. So he's warmed up towards me halfway on the second or third hole of the game. I was a little bit, how can I put it? I didn't like the fact that he had announced that he doesn't like to play with women, okay? But having Kevin's support, I decided, well, that's tough, Sean, I'm playing. And then when he saw that I could play, he then started to slow down and warm up to me on that occasion, you know?
I think Sean Connery was, I say, quite, perhaps be said to say, but a bit old-fashioned in his ways, and maybe some of that was to do with his upbringing and things like that.
He was a no nonsense guy, you know.
He very much seemed like somebody this is who he was who he projected himself to be. He was very straight, very this is who I am, sort of thing. So what was Kevin Costner like to know? Because obviously he's one of the great actors as well.
Totally delightful. Totally delightful. Very, very charming. Very soft-spoken. Before he married, he was pretty wild. He came to the Bahamas because he wanted to meet Saul, because he had a project that maybe Saul would be involved in Idaho. He had some land that belonged to the Indian nation, but he wanted to open casinos and, do a whole thing like Atlantis in the Bahamas. And he arrived at Nassau Airport on a private plane with his 3 children, a nanny, a friend of his, and 3 ladies. Okay, so I went to the airport to meet them off the plane, and Kevin came down first. I'd already met him, actually, so I knew him, but we weren't great friends. We became our friendship cemented in the Bahamas. And as he comes down the steps of the plane, he says, Viv, ride with me in the limousine and let the other ones take the second limousine. So I said, sure, no problem. I thought he might want to discuss with me how to do the presentation or how to, get the things done. He was coming for 5 days. So in the limousine, he says to me, I need you to do me a favor. You see the 3 young ladies that are traveling with us? Well, I'm actually having an affair with all 3, but none of them know that between them. So I need you to put them in completely separate ends of the hotel. and I need you to put me next to my children and the nanny and my friend also near me. And I said, but how are you going to handle this? Don't worry, I have a formula. I just tell the other one I've got to sleep with the kids tonight or something like that. And this went on for 5 days, okay? And nobody found out. The girls were not, aware of what really was going on. And then, of course, when we walked in the lobbies of the hotel or on the beach or wherever, he always had his arm around me because I was the safety guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The girls would walk ahead with his friend or whatever. And we had a great time. You know, he's so charming and so lovely and has a great manner on how he speaks. And I think he's a great actor too, you know.
Oh yeah. He's been some great films, hasn't he? And a very good director as well.
I mean, The Bodyguard or The Postman, I think, are iconic films of his, you know. Or the other one where he plays the cowboy that marries the Indian girl.
Oh yeah, John Dunbar, Dances with Wolves. Yeah.
Dance with the Wolves. Yeah. I mean, iconic. Yeah. Very
So I was
nice.
thinking that the difference between your character here in The Saint and The Persuaders, in many respects, they are similar in terms of
Kind of similar because they were
Similar.
both kind of a little bit villainous. Don't forget, in The Persuaders, I arranged my own kidnapping to force my dad to pay $1 million for my release so that I could run away with this terrible man I was with. Okay.
Yeah.
And here, my ultimate reason for being with this lady with all the jewelry inside her coat is that I really wanted to take the jewelry with me.
Yeah.
So I looked like an angel, but I wasn't really an angel. But in life, I'm really an angel, okay?
Oh, of course, yes. Do you like playing the characters that have that dual personality, that sort of depth to them? Is it fun to play a character that
I like surprises. I like surprises, you know. So I think it's a twist, you know, to the whole story. It's a twist, and you know, in The Persuaders, thank God she did double turn and came back and became a good girl, you know. She was barking up the wrong tree, as they say.
Oh yeah, I think you played it very well. You played it as she was young, she was in love, she was naive, and she didn't realize that she was being manipulated. And although she was manipulating her father, she was doing it because she thought she was in love. So it was the right reason for what she did. Whereas here in The Saint, of course, it is purely greed and her frustrations of being this handmaiden to this
terrible woman. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying tell woman, but a woman that is quite, as the title suggests, a bit absurd and a bit of a klutz, and she kind of feels a bit, you know, want to escape her shadow. I guess is probably. If you had to choose between the two, which roles do you prefer?
The Persuaders.
Yeah.
It was a more integral story, you know, and it was in color.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was in color.
And as you said, that with color, there's more money and therefore there's more production value. And
it was more of a film than a TV series. I'm telling you, The Saint was done like this. You had time for nothing. And, you know, you had your makeup on in the morning and they might do touch-ups during the day, but there was no time. If your costume didn't fit, that's tough for you, my dear. You've got to just get on with it. And there were no, I mean, normally I'm used to having a double of each of the outfits I have made for the films in case something happens to one of them. The Saint, there was nothing of that. You know, you had one outfit and if you spilled coffee on it, tough for you.
Did you enjoy working with people like the costume designers, and did you like?
I appreciated absolutely everybody. And, you know, in The Saint, you didn't have time to they don't become your family. But when you did films that lasted 3 months in Jamaica, for instance, you're on an island for 3 months. everybody becomes your family, and everybody plays a very important role, you know. And I mean, that was my first big Hollywood film, and with James Coburn and Anthony Quinn, Benny Carruthers, Lila Kadrova, Akim Tamirov. You know, I mean, it was a big cast. And then when I did Lord Jim with Peter O'Toole, again, it was a humongous production.
And what was Peter O'Toole like to work with?
Wonderful. Yeah. Also, I think he took a little pity on me being young and starting off in the business, you know. But one of my other great favorite actors, who also became a friend of mine till the end, was Omar Sharif. I mean, he was just, I mean, I just loved being with him. And we saw a lot of each other. We were true friends. I knew his mother, his sister, and he used to come a lot to my house. And when I had a house in Spain, he would come to the house with his family. And we got on really, really well, you know.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite actors. And he, in later years, he did a film called Top Secret, which was it's a bit like Naked Gun or the Airplane films, very a spoof of funny enough Elvis Presley music, sort of, and it's the spy genre. And Omar Sharif has a lovely role, sort of, you know, being this sort of, you know, he's quite good at the comedy as well as obviously the serious stuff. Didn't take himself too seriously. It seems he was quite a down to earth kind of guy. Is that a fair judgment of him?
I mean, I just really got on incredibly well with him, and I booked him a lot. You know, I took him to Milano, I took him to Rome, I took him to Madrid. He did a lot of TV, you know, guest parts that I would book for him. And it was always a joy to be with him, always a joy to be with him. And when he was living in Egypt, and he already, you know, that he had terrible Alzheimer's. He had Alzheimer's for 10 years, and he repressed the Alzheimer's until finally it took over. And I had an offer for him to pay him £100,000 if I could do a photo shoot with him in where he was living in Egypt by the Red Sea. I remember the town name in a second. And he always called me Mon Chou. This was his name for me. Bonjour, Mon Chou. Comment ça va, Mon Chou? And I called Catherine, his assistant, organized for me to fly there to discuss it with him. And she warned me that he doesn't remember anything. So I arrived there. Mon Chou, comment ça va? And I called Catherine and I said, Catherine, he's recognized me. He says he calls everybody Mon Chou, Catherine. Everybody. Now we're walking in the street and people are asking to take pictures of him and sign autographs. And he's saying to me, but Viviane, why do they want to take pictures of me and my autograph? I don't understand. What is going on? Do you know that at the end of his days, he had completely forgotten his life, who he was. And one day he just decided not to eat anymore, and that was it.
It's such a shame, isn't it, how cruel these conditions can be.
And for me, the most iconic first shot ever presentation of any actor is the entrance of Omar Sharif in Lawrence of Arabia. When you see this black figure on this camel at a distance, getting nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer. And then when finally you can see what's on that camel, this gorgeous looking man in this black jalabia, it's the most beautiful, beautiful introduction of any actor ever in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a wonderful classic film, isn't it? It's
yeah.
I should mention before I forget one more actor in the Saint, a guy called David Jackson. He plays one of the chief police assistants. And he's on
That's right. Yes.
the headphones. And again, he was in a Persuaders again as a policeman. So again, another little, and he had a great sort of comic sort of time. I don't know if he rings a bell in your memory at all.
If I saw him, I probably would remember him. You know, I had a brain hemorrhage 12 years ago, and although my memory is of the past, I mean, I'll remember things about when I was 4 years old, or 5 or 6 or 7, but I have got a problem with certain memory things, you know.
Right.
Yeah. It's the only thing that affected me. I had 20% chance of surviving it. It's a miracle I'm sitting here in front of you.
Oh yeah, nasty thing to happen and to survive.
An aneurysm. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't drink. I've never smoked. I eat very healthily, but I had an aneurysm, and that was it.
I think that's the scary thing about life. And you know, I mean, I've never felt like I've never felt invulnerable like a lot of young people. You know, I'm not as young anymore, but a lot of young people seem to think, oh, this will never happen to them, that will never happen to them. But it's sort of strange how some people can do everything correct, like yourself, you know, good diet, no bad habits, and other people have those habits and they live to be 90, and other people drop dead in 50s. So it's
extraordinary. I mean, you know, I don't think I'm infallible anymore. This was an awakening for me. And I was actually in a casino in London when I got the aneurysm, and I don't remember anything that happened except one thing. I was winning at the casino that night, and I was in the ambulance, and I had my daughter and my son-in-law and everybody in the ambulance, and I'm going, where are my chips? I want my chips. And the ambulance man leans over and says, Miss Ventura, you can't have any French fries in the condition you're in. And I was calling for my chips, you know.
Yeah.
But listen, I talk about it like this, but I nearly died.
Yeah.
20% chance of surviving it.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic that you know you beat such odds, and obviously we're all very delighted that you're here today talking to us. And it's just one of those things that's scary. I mean,
this doctor came out after 4 hours after operating on me and said to my daughters, and this is what they told me, Jasmine and Scheherazade, I want you to know that your mother won't die tonight, but you have to be prepared, because I don't know if she's going to know who you are. I don't know if she's ever going to walk, talk, eat, be the mother you've known all your life. And you've got to be prepared for that. I was in a coma for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And, you know, they told me that if I woke up and recognized Jasmine, they had to have somebody next to my bed for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks, because in case I wake up. And I woke up and it was my daughter that was there. I don't remember this either, by the way. And apparently when I saw Jasmine, I went, Jasmine, what are you doing here? Oh my God, where is my lipstick? And Jasmine said, she called Scheherazade and said, Mom's back.
Did you draw any positives from the experience? Did it drive you to do things that you wanted to do, or did it help you in that respect? Or?
I'll tell you what it did for me. It's given me an enormous amount of strength to continue. Okay, and it made me appreciate things a lot more than I used to.
Yeah,
I have a very different prospect of things in life today, and I am more aware of where I can help, how I can do things. Whereas before, I mean, I'm not saying I was a selfish person. I was always very thoughtful. But somehow this has given me another dimension to be more considerate. Okay. And I am much more considerate than I used to be.
I think that's the best we can do when life throws us awful things, is to reevaluate and try and sort of get some good from a terrible experience, you know, I think that's we make it constructive. That's
I never realized until 3 months afterwards how serious my situation was. I didn't realize it, you know. I mean, I was very wobbly for 2 months. But anyway, listen, it is what it is. And I was very lucky that that night, Kevin O'Neill, which is the head of geriatrics in England, walked past my bed. They all thought I was some drunken bitch, you know, reciting the Quran in Arabic, which I don't know, with the flowers in the hair. And they thought I was just drunk, you know. But anyway, yeah, it was quite an experience.
Oh yes, certainly. Just sort of having a few questions just to wrap up. You mentioned last time about working up with the Beatles on Help. I wondered if you had a favorite Beatle.
If I what?
If you had, which of the Beatles was your favorite?
Ringo,
yeah.
Yeah.
There was
from that film, I was asked to be Ringo's cake surprise on his birthday. Okay. I think it was his 21st birthday. And again, I was very young. And they put me in this cardboard cake, pretending it was a cake. And they carried me into the room and they lifted the lid off the cake. And I got out of the cake and went, "Happy birthday, Ringo." And to this day, whenever I see Ringo, whenever he sees me, he says, "Oh, look who's here, my cake surprise." You know? Yeah, he's a sweetheart.
Oh, that's very nice. I just want to ask you, you said about being the mascot for the football. How did you get that role? How did that happen?
Well, I was doing the film with Cliff Richards at the time, Finders Keepers. And my producer came on the set and said, "Viv, I've got something very interesting for you. Sir Bobby Moore's office called, and they have asked you officially to become their official mascot because they're now going to be playing in the World Cup. They finally got to the finals." And I went, "Football?" I said, "George, I don't want to be in a mascot to a football team. I want to be the mascot to a polo team, to a racing yachting team. Football? Viv, you've got to do it. This is going to be very good for the film," he says. So I was kind of pushed into it and I knew nothing about football. Okay.
Yeah.
And I learned very quickly, believe me. And to this day, when the World Cup comes around and they show the old documentaries of the British team coming out into the stadium to play, in their dressing room, there's this huge photograph of me and they all go out kissing the photograph, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm watching this on TV, black and white TV, okay? And then they win the World Cup. It's a Chelsea football stadium. There's 100,000 people and the Queen is there. And Bobby Moore comes with the cup and he's running around the football pitch. And right behind is Sir Bobby Charlton with a big poster of me in a banner going like this. And somebody sent me a photograph of Her Majesty the Queen from the back, pointing at my photograph as it's going by, obviously asking, "Who is that?" you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was an incredible honor, incredible honor. I've got amazing photographs from the day they came to the studio with Sean Connery and Yul Brynner and all the big wigs that were there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so wonderful and the perfect one to be the mascot for as well. So
oh well, that's very sweet of you to say that, you know. But yeah, it was quite. I wish I had been older and understood exactly what an incredible honor that was.
Yeah.
You know, because they now replay those clips from then. When the World Cup comes around. And you know, I think it was 4 years ago, remember that England was almost again into the final. And one of the newspapers in England, and I'm not sure if it's the Express or the Mail, wrote and said, "The problem with the British team this year is that they don't have Viviane Ventura as a mascot." You know, when they finally didn't get to the finals.
I'm surprised they haven't sort of try to get you back and just see if it worked.
Well, I don't know.
There's so much superstition with sports and lucky shirts and things like that. You think somebody might say, maybe it's you that could do it.
Yeah. Well, Qatar, that's the next World Cup, isn't it? Next year.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Keep our fingers crossed with that one. I wanted to touch very briefly on The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Was that a very similar experience to things like The Wild West in terms of production?
Yes. It was a series with Robert Vaughn and the blonde
David McCallum.
David McCallum, yes. Yeah. And I played a slave girl that seduces David Vaughn. He's visiting one of the Arab countries, and I'm a princess. And the plots that they do, Man from U.N.C.L.E., who understands them? But at the time I did it, it was a very hot series, And I have this photograph of me dressed up as an Arab princess lying on David Vaughn, and he's pulling a face of saying, "God, get her off me," Yeah.
I mean, did you? I suppose because you were so young at the time, perhaps was it only really later on that you realised, oh wow, I was in The Persuaders, U.N.C.L.E., The Saint, and is it sort of quite strange?
And I did one with Lloyd Bridges. He did a series.
Oh yeah, the loner. Yeah.
And I played his wife on this particular episode. I played a Mexican girl. He marries this Mexican girl, and it was amazing. It was amazing.
What was Lloyd Bridges like to work with?
Absolutely charming, beautiful, charming guy. Yeah. It just didn't quite match. I was really young and he was already a bit older, but that was my role, and Fox would lend me out. You see, the studio would lend me out to do all these episodes.
I think what was great about Lloyd Bridges' career that towards the later years he was playing a lot of comedic roles, and he really had a fantastic talent for comedy. I don't know if that sort of necessarily came through in a lot of his
this Loner was a story of a cowboy.
Much more serious.
It was a Western. There was no comedy on that, but I remember we lived in this little house by a river, and I was always cooking, and he would come home, and I was an Indian girl in the film.
I mean, when it came to acting, did you prefer to be in the more comedic series, so Get Smart, U.N.C.L.E., or did you like the more gritty, The Loner, The Saint? What did you prefer playing?
I don't know. I mean, and don't forget, I also did 3 films in Italy, 3 big movies. I did a film called Il Cornuto with Lando Buzzanca, who was a very big star in Italy, where I played a Sicilian wife. And my Italian is so incredibly good. They could not believe I wasn't Italian, Sicilian to that matter, Yeah. And then I did Un Italiano a Varsavia with Antonio Scifariello, who died very tragically when he was very young in a helicopter accident. And it's the story of a girl living in Sperlonga in a village in Italy, and my husband is gone to war, and his return and his adaptation to life. And then I did another film, which was an iconic film called Parliamo di Donne with Mastroianni and Alberto Sordi. So, I had this Italian episode in my life. I was 2 years in Rome.
And do you enjoy working in Italy? The film business different?
I did. And I enjoyed very much working in Italy. It was the time of La Dolce Vita. It was the end of the making of Cleopatra. So it was the new Hollywood at the time when I was there. Every actor from Hollywood was down via Veneto. I mean, you'd go to a restaurant and you'd sit down and you'd see Gregory Peck, you would see Charlton Heston, anybody who was anybody in Hollywood was in Rome at the time I was there.
And if you had,
I met Clint Eastwood at the time too. He was doing those Western films at the time in Rome as well. and I had a wonderful time. Again, he kind of took me under his wing and was very protective of me. And we saw a lot of each other. We had really a lot. And, you know, we did lovely things. We'd go in a horse and carriage at night in Rome and visit the ruins and talk about everything. And he was a wonderful, wonderful friend, wonderful friend.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
I had a question come in. One of the viewers saw a photograph of you and Steven Spielberg. Do you have any memories of Steven Spielberg?
Well, my dream would have been to have worked with Steven Spielberg, but this photograph is from La Shoah. You know, Steven Spielberg did something very wonderful. He has actually made a catalog with all the names of the Jewish victims of World War II. It's called La Shoah, okay? And I gave a dinner for him in London when he was there. And I had iconic guests like Bruce Forsyth and Wilmedia Forsyth. I think Roger came to the dinner. I mean, I had a lot of big names at the dinner. And I believe that photograph was taken that night. I was his dinner guest. I was his dinner companion.
Oh, lovely.
Of course, my dream is that I would have worked one day in one of his movies, of course, but that opportunity never came my way.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's one of the best directors in the world, and you know, undoubtedly.
Yeah. And he kept saying to me all evening, "You're going to work for me one day. I know you're going to work for me one day." I said, "Stop putting me in promised land. I've been there."
I mean, I suppose that's the thing with Hollywood. People say, "Oh well, we'll call you," and then it doesn't happen. So with something like Roger Moore, and he remembers you for The Persuaders.
Yeah.
Very nice when actually they do follow.
Yeah, Roger followed. Roger did follow. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you had any other, I mean, you've covered a few already, but is there any highlights from your promotional business that you like, any event that you think, oh, this was my favorite to put on, or it was just, you know, your favorite?
Well, I've done some amazing things because of the life I've had. I'm very fortunate. One of my most extraordinary things was going to see the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in Bodh Gaya. Originally, I had arrived in India to do an article on Rajiv Gandhi when he was prime minister, but by the time I got to Delhi, he lost the elections. And I was now stuck at the Oberoi Hotel with my assistant and the photographer. So I was waiting to see what on earth I was going to do now I was in India. I wasn't going to waste the trip. And the Herald Tribune in my room announces His Holiness, this is extraordinary what happened. His Holiness nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So I go to the concierge of the hotel. "Excuse me, doesn't His Holiness live here?" "Oh yes, very, very close. You take a plane to Dar es Salaam and you go to the Tibet mission. It's a 3-hour flight from Delhi, okay?" So he gives me a phone number and I'm calling that number day in and day out. And we didn't have the mobiles we have today. They were the big ones, so you don't travel with them. So every time I have to go to a phone and no answer. 24 hours go by. There's no answer from this number. But Ms. Ventura, there's a Tibet mission in Delhi. I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" So now I'm calling this Tibet mission in Delhi hour on hour. Finally, a little voice goes, "Hello, is this His Holiness mission? Is this his residence?" "Yes, it is. Is His Holiness there?" "Oh no, His Holiness in Bodh Gaya this week, very holy week. Buddha got enlightened." So I go down to the concierge, say, "Where's Bodh Gaya?" "Very close. You take a plane to Patna, then you take a taxi." The plane to Patna is a 5-hour jet flight. It's the outside of India. And the taxi is a 7-hour drive from Patna to the mountains to Bodh Gaya. It's where the Buddha sat under the banyan tree for 48 hours and wrote the book for the Buddhism, okay? Or got inspired or got it, whatever. So now we arrive in Bodh Gaya and it's 2 a.m. And it looks like Las Vegas because there are all these Tibetan temples that are all lit up. I mean, it looks like you really hit civilization. I get to the temple. I push my way. There's 200 young kids waiting behind these wrought iron gates. But, you know, looking the way I look, people kind of move away. I don't know. They think I got a disease, or maybe we should just let her go by, you know. And I get to the front of the rails, and there's a monk going around with the incense. Excuse me. I'm Viviane Ventura. I've come all the way from London to congratulate His Holiness on the Nobel Peace Prize. Can I please see somebody to see him tomorrow? The monk looks at me, and then they send out this Tibetan guy. Somebody from London to see His Holiness? I said, that'll be me. And I throw my magazine over, Hello Magazine, and my card. And the guy looks at me and he says, wait a minute. He goes and comes back and he says, tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, he can give you 15 minutes. I thought it was 6 o'clock in the evening. No, 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? It's now 3 o'clock in the morning, and we get back into this taxi. Now, the taxis in Bodh Gaya, in Patna, are the cars left by the English Raj. So from the outside, they look like a Ford, really comfortable. But the seats have been taken out and a wooden bench is put in with a sheet. And I don't know what they do with the suspension. They don't have suspension either. So you're 7 hours going up and down sideways, and you're on a one-way road that really two cars should not be driving. It's like a one-way. It was quite a trip. Please take us to a hotel. Oh, I'm very, very sorry. No hotels in Bodh Gaya. I said, don't be ridiculous. There's 2 million Buddhists in Bodh Gaya at the moment. Where are they sleeping? In rest houses. Do you know what a rest house is? It's a roof.
Yeah.
They give you a mat and a bowl of rice, and they tell you to find a space and lie down.
Right. Okay.
And it's 3 a.m. We go to the biggest rest house there is, and every space is taken and everybody's asleep, except in the alleyways. So since we've got to be up at 5, I tell my photographer to lie next to me and my assistant on the other side. And, you know, I used to suffer with terrible migraines, and I used to travel with a kit that when I felt the migraine coming, boom, zap, I gave myself the injection and the migraine wouldn't come. I didn't have my kit with me. And I got so sick, you have no idea. And I said to the photographer, Jim, whatever happens, you carry me to His Holiness tomorrow morning. Do you hear me? I don't care what I look like. I don't care what I'm doing. You take me there. We arrived at 6 a.m. at the gates of the temple. And this guy, this gorgeous guy we'd seen the night before, says, Miss Ventura, I'm really sorry, but His Holiness is running late and he's going to be about 2 hours. And Jim says, well, Miss Ventura's been really sick all night. Is there a place she could lie down? This is a true story, what I'm telling you. Please come in. And they take us in and they take me into His Holiness bedroom and they lie me on his bed. Steve, I mean, Philip, I'm going to tell you something. I'm lying in this bed and I'm worried because it's His Holiness bed and I'm not feeling well, but I fell asleep. And I woke up when somebody was caressing my forehead saying, are we feeling better now? Are we feeling better? And I opened my eyes. Your Holiness, of course I'm feeling better, you know. Anyway, long story, I had a relief of my migraine. We stayed for 2 hours with him. It was the front cover of every magazine about His Holiness. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic interview and shoot. 10 years go by, Philip. I'm in Los Angeles with my son-in-law, Lord Goldsmith, and my daughter. He's going to receive an award from Leonardo DiCaprio from US1, okay? Environmentalist, right? And we're standing in line and we're waiting for Leonardo DiCaprio to arrive. And the photographers are on the other side. And suddenly Leonardo arrives with His Holiness. His Holiness sees me standing on the line next to my daughter, breaks the line and walks up to me and says, are your headaches better now? Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it's beyond. And he was adorable. What can I tell you? I mean, just wonderful human being.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw that in a film, you wouldn't believe it, would you? All those.
No.
That's a wonderful.
And this was in front of absolutely everybody. You remembered what a terrible migraine I had that time when I was in Bodh
Did you find and after you finished acting, did you find it quite natural to get into journalism, and you're quite happy sort of doing that?
No, I always looked for the impossible. You know, I always the motto of my company is, if we can come to a financial arrangement and you want an appointment with God, I may make it possible. That's the motto. Okay. But then I did something else which was also iconic, was the last concert Freddie Mercury did when the Olympic torch arrived in Barcelona. And he sang with Montserrat Caballé and that iconic song, Barcelona. And Freddie was really ill then. Nobody knew it. Nobody knew how sick he was. And Montserrat Caballé was that very heavy opera singer, Spanish singer, very, very famous. And they sang this iconic song, and the whole of Barcelona had screens in the street. People came and sat in the street in their own chairs so they could watch this concert. That was the most incredible concert, incredible. And Montserrat Caballé, I was standing on the stage, you know, on the side. She would come off the stage and she would say, in Spanish, she would say to me, "He's sweating so much. Is he all right? Is he sweating so much?" You know? Yeah.
I don't think we can probably top that story. To be honest, I think I'll wrap it up just to finish off on. So just to come full circle back to finish off with the Saint. How do you, having seen the episode recently, did you enjoy it? Do you think it holds up very well?
Very much, very much. And for me, it is such a pleasure to set my eyes on Roger. You know, such a pleasure, such an honor and privilege that I had the opportunity to say that I could call myself a friend of his.
And I suppose if you had to say what your favorite scenes were, I'm guessing anything with Roger Moore. You're playing opposite him, most likely.
Without having a love affair. We were never had a love affair, nothing. I just want to make that very clear. He really was a friend of mine. He cared about me and about my career and was always ready to give me advice and a helping hand.
I think what was so lovely about these events that I do is that the reason why I keep doing them is because everybody I speak to, like yourself, is so lovely and so so warm and accommodating and full of wonderful stories and just full of life, and it's always a great privilege to do them, and it's been a great privilege to talk to you this evening. It's been fantastic.
No, my pleasure, Philip. You're great and you're very warm, and you know, you put the right questions and your right concept. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be asked to come back on your program.
Well, it's entirely my privilege. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been wonderful. I'm sure everyone wants to just say thank you to Vivian for a wonderful night. I've got a few thank yous to come through. We'll just have one final question come in to see if we could get to this.
Don't ask me how old I am, because the whole thing off.
A question: if you ever had the opportunity to come to Argentina, have you ever been to Argentina?
Oh my God, have I had an opportunity to come to Argentina?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I had an exclusive photo shoot and at home with President Menem when he was married to Cecilia Bolocco. And we were going to do the shoot in their private apartment, not in their villa, which is in one of the main avenues of Argentina. I was there with Tico Medina, which is a great writer, and the photographer. We were 5 people, we flew in. And we go to the apartment, and I say to the photographer, start setting up in the sitting room. And by the way, we donated $100,000 to their foundation. You know, they all have these foundations. You really don't know where the money goes, but that's the way it is.
Right.
And I'm sitting in a little antique hallway while the photographer's putting up the lights. And with that, President Menem comes out with Kleenex coming out of his shirt, because he's obviously putting makeup or doing whatever he's doing, saying that Cecilia will be 15 minutes. She's having her hair done. I said, Mr. President, take the time you want. We're so honored to be here. It's going to be wonderful. So he goes back in, and as I'm sitting in this empty room on a banquet with Tico Medina, there's a big bang on the front door. And it wasn't like a knock, it was like a bash, you know. And the maid comes out and opens the door, and the door is pushed open. And there's a guy in a military outfit waving a paper in his hand saying, I've got an order here to arrest the president. And so I'm sitting there watching this. And he looks at me and he says, who are you? I'm Viviane Ventura. And he says to me, you better leave. He says, behind this guy, there's about 10 soldiers with shotguns and dogs and everything. So I go into the sitting room and I tell the photographer, leave everything, we're leaving. And we left the apartment, rushed out of the apartment, because, you know, you never know in South America how things are going to end up, right? And the moment I get into the hotel, I switch the TV on, and it's President Menem with his hands cuffed at his back, and the Kleenex is still popping out of his shirt. And they arrested him. I don't know if you remember that incident. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gonzalo's from Argentina, so I'm sure he appreciated that on a level than say other people might have done. So
yeah, it's a beautiful country, beautiful country. It's one of those countries that when God created South America, I'm sure he felt guilty having given Argentina so much beauty, so many resources, you know.
Oh yeah, it's on my top of my list to go to one day.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, everywhere you go, anywhere you go, and everywhere you go in Argentina is mesmerizing. With wine country, Las Pampas, Ushuaia, which is the southern tip. And you know that in Argentina, and I'm sure Gonzalo is going to agree with me, in Ushuaia, there was a tribe of indigenous people. You know, when the Spanish colonized Latin America, they killed or they converted the indigenous tribes, okay? Because they were not warriors, these tribes. None of them knew how to defend themselves, except for this tribe in southern tip of Argentina. They were never colonized by the conquistadores or by the Jesuit priests. They kept their independence. And in fact, Ushuaia is an area that has remained to its truest origin all this time, because of these the Indian tribe, I can't remember the name of it, ferocious, yeah.
Having traveled so much in your life, is do you have a favorite place in the world?
Wow, that's a difficult question to answer. You know, I grew up in South America. I grew up in Colombia. And again, they say that when God made South America and decided to go with St. Peter to make a recce of what he had given to each country, goes to Venezuela and says, I've given oil to Venezuela, goes to Brazil, I've made it the biggest country in the world with the great Amazon area and a lot of natural resources, goes to Argentina and says, I've given Argentina Las Pampas and I've given them the Andes and the wine region, and et cetera, goes to every country and makes, but then comes to Colombia. Well, I've given Colombia emeralds, I've given it gold, I've given it oil, I've given them areas where you can grow 3 harvests a year. They have the Pacific, they have the Atlantic, they have the Caribbean, they have the jungle, the Amazon, they have the savanna, they have the Andes. Oh my God, Peter, I've made a big mistake. This is not right. I have to find an equalizer because I've given Colombia too much. What am I going to do? I'm going to think about it. And he thought about it. And the next day he says to Peter, I've done it. I know what I'm going to do. Created the Colombian.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great story, and yeah, I think it's a great one to end it on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip,
for your time.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's all right. Take care and have a lovely enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.